Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. Today, we are thrilled to welcome someone who was just about in everything when I was growing up, including such films as Eat My Dust, Grand Theft Auto, The Fish Who Saved Pittsburgh, as well as being one of the stars of CPO Sharkey with Don Rickles, and now is an executive producer for quite some time, including the fascinating new special, Unknown, The Lost Pyramid, which is out now on Netflix. Please help us welcome Peter Isacksen. Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, happy to be here. Well, happy to be anywhere, but yeah.
Well, we have so much to cover, but to start, you grew up in California. Was your family very interested in movies or the arts?
No, we grew up, actually, we moved when I was about 8 years old from New Hampshire to La Mirada, California, which is out kind of Orange County-ish. And other than watching Ed Sullivan, my mom had an artistic bent, which came later in her life, and she was a potter and an artist. But no, it wasn't. And how it really happened was I was a sophomore in high school and a terrible student. And the high school said, well, you got a choice. You got to take an elective. And I went, what's an elective? And they said, well, it's kind of an easy class. I said, great. Okay. You can be on the yearbook or you can be in drama one. I went, oh man, drama one, that sounds good, because maybe there's girls, because I'd never dated. And I just had grown up to be 6'6" and probably 180 and a little shy and gawky. So I took drama, and there was an amazing teacher. Just kind of the universe throughout my life has shone light on, like, we're going to help you out here. And Doyle Baker was an amazing teacher. And to this day, I still have friends on Facebook, Marla Pennington, who was in Small Wonder, and Cinda Adams and other people that they wanted to be actors. So I didn't know. So Doyle Baker said, sit in a chair in the middle of the theater around, and shined a light on me and said, which no one had ever done, and said, tell me about Peter. And I said, well, my sister, she's a cheerleader and she's, pretty and all this stuff. And my brother, he's kind of the troublemaker. And Doyle said, no. I want to know about Peter. Who's Peter? No one had ever asked that question. And I came out of this shell, and then through the class, I could find that I wasn't 6'6" and 180 and gawky. I could hide behind a character. So I really put everything I could into being a really good actor. And then as time went by, and I got a little lucky and met, through happenstance, auditioning at Roger Corman, I met Ron Howard. Oh. And to be totally 100% clear, I would not be sitting in this chair without Ron Howard. He was my mentor, my inspiration. I loved his dad. I'm so blessed to be in his book, The Boys. That's a really good read. So, I found myself, 23, 24, on NBC television with Don Rickles, who I was such a geek. I worked in a restaurant and I memorized Hello Dummy. So I could say to the waiters that are coming that would be late to get the food, I would go, hey, hockey puck, get over here and do this and that. And so to meet him was just beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of.
Well, we're going to ask about Don Rickles. Just going back to Ron Howard, I mean, he was already so well known, like you said, been on Andy Griffith, Happy Days, many others. So what's that like for you in your first role to be with such a well-known actor? I mean, is there any intimidation on your end at all?
Well, because I wasn't raised around it, the first thing he said to me, if I can remember it correctly, was, "You play ball?" Because he was a huge basketball fan. And I said, "Yeah, look, I played a little ball. I played in high school, played with this guy, Gary Carter, who was a Met, who went to the Hall of Fame and then passed away." And all of a sudden, there was a connection. There wasn't two actors connecting. It was two friends connecting. And it, you know, when you meet someone and you just know you're going to be my friend forever, that was Ron Howard. And he constantly, when I sold my first show on Fox, they said, "Well, it's talent contingent." And so I called Ron and said, "Would you do it?" And he said, "Yeah, just I'm going to have my people call me and we'll set up a date." And it was a show about a day in the life of a celebrity on Fox. And his people called me and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Ron Howard does not just say to us, call him and book it. He's Ron effing Howard. He's doing Apollo 13. I said, "No, I know. I'd like to spend a day with him doing that." He said, "Who are you? Like, what do you have on him?" So my first day as a producer was Ron and my other friend, Tom Hanks, who happened to be in Apollo 13. And Fox looked at me and said, "Who are you?" And I went, "I know. It's sometimes, but that's Ron. Ron just, it's just Ron and Cheryl and Clint, and Rance was a great guy. It just, I've been surrounded by some really, really good people.
Yeah,
I want to come back for 1 second. I'm going to cut in for one thing. I'm going to come right back to Ron Howard. So I know, I had a question there, but I had no idea about this until you mentioned it. I am the biggest Met fan. What was it Gary Carter like? So I had no idea that you had that association.
Oh yeah. So I went to high school with him, and I was it was my senior year in high school. We had moved, and I became, later, because we'd see each other on the road. We didn't know each other that well in high school, but I would just go and watch him play. He was a phenomenal athlete. He didn't play his senior year as quarterback because he had 120 offers as a junior, as a quarterback. So I think he was drafted originally by the Giants because that's where his brother went. And then somehow he ended up to the Expos and then ended up at the Mets. But we'd see each other at games, and I was Eyes, EYES, and he was the kid. And so I'd say, "Kid." He goes, "Eyes, how you doing?" I said, "Good." And he said, "Still on TV?" I said, "Still in the league." And that's just was this shortcut of two knuckleheads that went to high school together. And Joe Petruccio, who's a wonderful artist who does great caricatures of the Mets, always writes about Gary every year. And he was a good guy. He had a job at a gas station in Fullerton that he didn't do a damn thing. They hired him because he was Gary Carter. And so he sat, and he had the most beautiful girlfriend, and he'd sit and he'd kind of wave to people getting gas. And it was like, "You're already a star. At 18, you're a star." Anyway, he's a cool dude.
One of my favorite players growing up. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
But no. Just going back to that first film, we need to say the title was "Eat My Dust."
Right.
Yes.
What was it like working with Ron, back then?
Ron did it, if you read his book, in order to direct Grand Theft Auto. Roger Corman made a very unique deal with him that if you do Eat My Dust, which was not the script that Ron went in and presented, but Corman was so smart and ran such a tight ship that he goes, "You do Eat My Dust. I know I'm going to make money, and you can go then and direct Grand Theft Auto." And Charles Griffith directed Eat My Dust. And it was, I don't know, 17 days. So there wasn't a lot of like movie lounge time, whereas they're setting up a take and this and that. Like on the Rainbow, we'd have 3 weeks of lounge time. But Eat My Dust was boom, 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 you're done. See you tomorrow. And that's the way Corman ran it. And it was just fun. And Ron had his mom out there, his dad was involved, his brother was, it was a family movie. And it was really fun to do. It was like real actors, a real, you know, Griffith had done a lot of Corman stuff. So it was.
You also had, I mean, Corman's legendary. I mean, you also had Dave Madden on that, and Paul Bartel, who went on to make Eating Raoul. So some of your memories with them.
Yeah, just that you didn't know who would show up day to day, because I think what Roger Corman would do would be, oh, you got a hole? I'll fill it this way. I'll do this. We had DPs, and I didn't really look at the behind the scenes because that wasn't my, I didn't really understand it at that point. Later as an actor, I started to get very interested in what people are doing. And, but yeah, Bartels and, oh, there was there was a lot of great people that just showed up. On Grand Theft Auto, Ron's wife, Cheryl, catered it. I mean, it was like family. It was like you go out and make a movie.
Were you asked to do Grand Theft Auto immediately after Eat My Dust? Was that how it worked?
Well, I had done a season of Sharkey, I guess, or a half season or something. And so Ron came to me and said, would you do this? And it was like, duh, yeah, of course I will. And so we all went up to Victorville for 6 weeks and just started to shoot. And he had an incredible vision, and he already had a sense of what he wanted to do. And you know, I had Clint by my side, so we were just complete idiots, just riding around in the car. And who knew when they were shooting and when they weren't? But Ron would go, got it, great, you guys were. But the other brilliant thing about Roger Corman and Ron and everybody else is that you'd look at the camera as an actor and you'd go, you weren't behind the camera yesterday. And he goes, no. He said, I just asked Ron if I could do it because it's really my interest. And Ron said, yeah, why don't you shoot today?
Wow.
That's the very essence of Ron. And I don't mean to talk about, I always just make it clear to people that I sit in this chair in this beautiful home and this and that because of his influence, guidance, and mentorship.
Wow. Well, it just sounds like you let you guys, be yourselves, which is like the key to everything in the performance business, as far as I'm concerned. But what was there anything special about the way he directed you, or anything like that?
Well, he was very, very, having worked with, you take two types of directors. You take like Peter Baldwin, who did Sharkey, who's a multi-camera, that those directors really are directing for the writers, right? Because it's like, these are the writers' words. So you guys are gonna mimic kind of the rhythm and the jokes that the writers have written. And on a film, there's a lot more looseness. There was a lot more improv. There was like, hey, why don't you guys, here's basically what the scene's about. Why don't you guys fill it in? And Ron would give us that freedom to do that. And at the end of the scene, we had to be at a certain point where he could cut to the next scene. So there was some storytelling, but from my memory, it was, what I loved about it, especially starting out, was the looseness. And the flip side of that was when I did my first hour show during Sharkey was Love Boat. And I came in and I played a ballerina, which was written for Horseshack on Welcome Back, Kotter. And I show up and everyone looks at me and goes, holy crap, have we made a mistake? And the director was very boom, boom, boom. A leads to B leads to C. And I was so taken that it was the Love Boat. I thought I was going on a cruise. So that I went to Fox and went on a stage and there's a boat. I was like, and so that was frustrating for the director because I was too loose and he wanted to get all of his shots and he had a hard day and just like every hour show you ever do. But Ron, at whatever age he was, knew that he was going to be a big director. Everyone knew it. He had this sense of confidence, and he was 3 shots ahead. He was 3 setups ahead. He was talking during lunch about tomorrow and the next day. And hey, let's make sure we do this and get this car because I'm going to do this with this car. And we got stunts coming up. So we'd have meetings with a stunt. He was Ron Howard. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's just like, that's why he's the superstar.
Did you have much interaction with Gary Marshall or Marion Ross on that film?
Marion Ross came to me. She and I did a bunch of shows together. I loved her because she was on Happy Days and I'd spent some time there. And so she came to me and said, Peter, I have a question. She goes, my agent said, I'm the highest paid actor on the film. And so I'm just curious, how much are you making?
Wow.
And I said, no, I'm curious. How much are you making?
Yeah.
She said, $800 a week. I said, I'm $795. She said, well, that's Roger Corman. He's like, whatever he could use to get you to feel good about yourself. And that this is, you know, I think Nancy, who was a star, probably had a different deal. She probably got 2 or 3 movies, so he amortized it that way. See, amortize is a word I can use now because I'm a producer. So I know what that word meant. But yeah, Marion was just the sweetest. I think I did a Fantasy Island. I did a Love Boat. I mean, she's one of those great actresses. Always a pro.
So the film became a relative hit, and it's your second movie. At this point, did you feel like you kind of made it?
Well, at that point, I was on television with Don Rickles, where there's only 4 channels, and every week, 35 million people. Like you couldn't walk through the grocery store. And being 6'6", you know, you stand out. And so I really had. I would go over to Ron's house in Studio City, and he would say, "Sit down," and we'd talk about it. And he had cashed out of the Jimmy Coogan fund that, you know, keeps your money until you're some age. And he said, listen, I don't have to work again, but you do, and I do, but we have to be professionals and we have to be grounded, because you do one bad job and all of a sudden the story starts to tell that you're a pain in the ass to work with and this and that. And I swore to myself, I'm going to be a good influence. I'm going to be the happiest one on set from the time I get to makeup to the time I leave. And that's the influence that Rickles had. We were in the rehearsal one day. This is how he ran a set. So I'm with Don Rickles, for crying out loud. I mean, it doesn't get any better. And the phone rings in one of those big NBC rehearsal halls. So of course, me being 24 and full of energy, I run over to the phone, said, oh, and I hear, is Don there? And I said, yes, he is. Hold on one sec. Who's calling? Tell him it's Frank. I turn around, and at this point, the entire 35 people that are watching me answer the phone, which the prop guys always did, are now dead silent. And I went, Don, it's for you. He said, I know. I said, it's Frank. Like, how great is this? He walks over, hangs up the phone, turns around. Now everyone has not taken a breath since I answered the phone. And turns around and he goes, you big, dumb moose. I said, yes. He said, it's not Frank. It's Mr. Sinatra. Got it. And don't ever answer the phone. Oh, that's Like, I don't know. It's just, you got the goofiest, tallest kid on the planet who's interacting with Don effing Rickles.
Well, isn't it a badge of honor to be insulted by Rickles?
Without a doubt.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. All day. And, and then he would do this stuff where he did and so did Red Fox, and so did Freddie Prinze, and everyone. NBC was like I didn't go to college, so it was my college. Mm-hmm. And in front of, just like Carson did, they would come out and do a warm-up, and Rickles would come out and do about a half hour because he was dreading doing lines and being an actor and being a sitcom actor, so he would do this. And my dad, who was a garment salesman, would sit in the audience, and at the end of it, Don would say, hey, by the way, we've got an incredible comic, Slappy White. Slappy, thanks for coming to the show today, and this and that. And we got Dean Martin, who I do his roast every week. Dean, are you drunk enough? And this and that. And then he'd go, where's my buddy Eddie? And my dad was Ed Isaacsen. Landed on D-Day at 17 years old. Garment salesman, never really made a lot of money. And Don would shine the light on my father and say, Eddie, sorry, I get emotional. He said, Eddie, you and me backstage, have a little shivas. And he did it every week. And my father died 6 weeks after we finished taping. Mm-hmm. And my mom said that Don Rickles kept him alive.
That's great.
And he did.
Wow.
And that's the heart of Don Rickles. He was a gentle, beautiful man.
Wow.
I
was just
no, I love Rick, big huge fan. We'll come back to CPO Sharkey in a second, but I just want to touch base quickly. You mentioned that Love Boat. So what was it like? Those were like Love Boat and Fantasy Island were like the biggest shows of the decade among them. It's really. So what was it like? And you played Stubing's nephew, right?
Yes, Courtney Stubing.
Right. So, and what was it like, working on that show, the whole experience? And were you disappointed because you didn't? I thought that you would have come back for many more episodes after that. And
I guess so. Yeah. Why didn't I?
Yeah.
I don't think they really knew it was such a machine that to get people in, get people out, and there are new people on TV and this and that. And everybody's busy. So you don't really look at, why aren't I going back to that? What Aaron Spelling did for me was kept me busy with every other show. I did a Fantasy Island almost every year. Never got the girl. Sonny Bono got the girl on an episode, and I didn't get the girl. The whole show is about getting the girl. I never got the girl. And then, but he was such a dear, wonderful fan and an incredible producer, Mr. Spelling, that we were out at the racetrack watching. I did a Matt Houston because Mr. Spelling said, let Peter be a bad guy. He's never been a bad guy. Let him be a bad guy. So on Matt Houston, I was the killer. And I'm standing watching the scene before us, and I feel someone next to me, and I look down, and it's Mr. Spelling. So I said, hi, Mr. Spelling. He said, hi, Peter. He said, thanks for doing this. I said, no, trust me, thank you. And he was like watching, he said, you know why I hire you? I said, no, but I'm really grateful that you do. And because he paid more than anybody else, 10 grand a week for this. And I said, so I'm really grateful that you do. And he said, no. He said, you're one of those actors that you don't chew gum and you don't smoke as a device. And he said, I like that. So you're just a pure, you take my words, you do this, you act. And I can't say he was a friend, but he was a real, you always knew you were going to get some work from the Spelling Group. And it's all these years later, I get more love from those shows. He plays them, they're played all the time. So, yeah.
Well, how did you get cast in Sharkey to begin with? I mean, did they approach you or you just had an audition?
No, it was again Ron Howard. Ron said, have you ever been to Paramount Studios? And I said, no. And he said, well, come on over, we'll have lunch. I said, okay. So I pulled my car in, and the guard says, well, Mr. Howard, they're running a little late on Happy Days. They're about a half hour behind. So Ron would like you to meet these two casting ladies that have their own company and do this. And they're up the street a little bit in Paramount. So I went up, and they said, hey, yeah, Ron never really introduces us to anybody. So fun, sit down. We're doing one project, and why don't you read with us? So they gave me 2 pages of a pilot script. And of course, me being the knucklehead actor, I just went, funny. Oh, that's good. Oh, yeah, that's funny. And they went, no, audition it with us. Read it back and forth with us. Went, oh, yeah, gotcha. Didn't know. So read it. They sent me over to Aaron Rubin, who ran it and did Gomer Pyle and Andy Griffith and did all that stuff. So he was a big showrunner. And I read for him. And he said, you were great. He said, there's a little something missing. So let us think about it for a couple of days. And I went on a road trip with my father down to Fayetteville, Arkansas. My father drove all the time. So I went down there and heard these people at the hotel and this and that say, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. You going to have breakfast with us today? You going to do this? Going to do this? And I went, so I came back to NBC, and Aaron Rubin said, so anything that you're thinking of? And I went, excuse me, Chief, this is Seaman Pruitt. And they all started to laugh. And he went, that's it. That's who it is. That's who Pruitt is. He said, you start Monday.
Oh, man.
Sometimes,
so, no, yeah. I mean, good grief. Yeah, I don't even know how to comment on that. That's great. That's just, it's like, it's like those moments. And I can't say, I can only say I've had a couple of inspired moments in an audition where I just went, I'm just going to do this. I don't know why. And it ended up working and getting me the job. It's like something pops into your head that just connects. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about performing like that. That's really amazing. So you told us what Rickles was like. What was he like to work with? What was his working method?
His method was, he was not a trained actor. And so that was daunting to him. I think when he worked with somebody like Martin Scorsese, just like Ron Howard and the directors that I worked with like that, they became a blanket, and I'm sure you've had it too. They become a blanket you can kind of hold on to. So they're never going to let you look like an idiot. So I think Scorsese with that. We had Peter Baldwin the first year, and Peter Baldwin was that understood Don, that he wasn't, when he needed to take a break in between scenes or he needed to do this, we would build, I think Peter built a schedule that was loose enough for Don to be comic Don and then actor Don. That he didn't say, no, see, your character would do this. It wasn't character driven. CPO Sharkey was Don, and Don was CPO Sharkey. It wasn't this great dive into, you saw what you got. And he was allowed to do kind of his act in a half-hour format with other characters. And the more he did it, the more comfortable he felt. And the only day I really remember going off the rails was when Carson came in because Don had broken his ashtray.
Ask about that. Yeah, you were there.
Yeah. And all of a sudden we're in the back and we're looking at camera angles. We went, I've never seen that one. We don't shoot from the door in between us and Carson. And he walked in, and it was like they had set it up with somebody and completely surprised Don. And Don was then off the rails, and I think we shot till about 2 a.m. and just to get him calmed down and this and that. But, it's one of those great TV moments that you're just proud to be a part of.
Man,
it really is one of the best histories. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember seeing it. I saw it. I saw it happen. And I thought as much because I never met Don Rickles or had a chance to work with him in any way, but I did, of course, I was as exposed to him as anyone else. So you're seeing this super tough, heavily sarcastic, amazing wit, just absolutely baffled. He just looked completely
Right.
like completely shocked. And I thought, my God, this is a side to this man that we will never get to see again, And Johnny Carson did that, that was really incredible. So I don't mean to comment on something you were there for, but from the audience side of it, it was just amazing to see.
And I think he put Carson up on such a pedestal. As Carson had NBC wired. He had mirrors at every spot, that when he walked in from his space, he was this. He didn't speak to anyone. He went to his office, did this, went to Harry Blake, did makeup, did the show, and it looked like he was put on this earth to do the show. And Don was a working man's comic who still, he started in, I guess, Brooklyn or Staten Island or someplace with tough crowds. And I think he really was in awe of Carson. So he'd make fun of Johnny's money, which Johnny didn't love. And Paul Block, who produced The Tonight Show, is still a Facebook buddy. And, once in a while we'll talk about that. But it was, you never saw Don rattled. That's such a good way to put it. But
yeah,
if anyone could do it, Carson could do it.
Well, you were on Carson. Whoever we had that has been on Carson always said that he was like such a great personality on camera, off camera, like kind of leave him alone. Did you find that the same?
Yeah, I watched every warm up and this and that, and Paul Block said, "Hey, we'd like to have you on the show." So I went back and did a whole pre-interview, because he said, for new guests, Carson wants question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. He doesn't want to be surprised by anything. He loves young Sharkey, but this is what it is. So I told all these goofy stories that I played football with this guy, Leo Haggerty, in La Mirada, and Haggerty had this voice. So Block's like, great, do the voice, tell the story. And I'm sitting in well, I'll back up one bit just to preface and frame all this. I got a letter a couple of years ago from a guy that does the Carson podcast, and he has the whole library, and he's blessed by Johnny and Rack and all that stuff. Or not Rack, that's Rack Clark, but Johnny's family. So he wrote me a letter and said, "I'd like you to do it." And I said, "I'm just confused. I did 2 of them. Why me? You got everybody else." And he said, "Because it was the hardest 6 minutes of television I've ever watched." And I went, okay. So now we go back. I've done my pre-interview, and I'm in the green room that's under the floor of The Tonight Show. And I'm following Andy Kaufman on his first Tonight Show appearance.
Oh.
And they are stomping and laughing so loud, I thought they were going to come through the roof and into the green room. And I immediately, with all of my basic instincts, went, this is not who I should follow. They should just let Andy finish the show. He's totally tied in with Carson. So Paul Block comes back, and I said, maybe I just do it tomorrow or this. He said, no, you're going to be great. He said, you're the perfect next guest. So I went out, walked in, didn't say hi to Ed, didn't do anything, just scared to death, sat in my chair. And Johnny said, so what's it like working with Rickles? And I went, no, when I was a sophomore, I was a quarterback in high school. And see, I had a coach, because that's what they said, I didn't even hear what he said. And I just started to ramble. And I saw Johnny just push the float out to sea. And I went, oh, I'm done. And within 30 seconds, there was a little banter between me and Andy, but I've never even watched it. But it was me learning to be Peter as opposed to what someone tells me I should be. And Carson was the biggest learning lesson that for me. And you're right. He didn't need he could have done the show every night with Ed and Doc and Freddie DeCordova. That's all he needed. That's how good he was. So a year later, Rickles had a guest shot, and he said, "You want to make it right on Carson?" And I said, "More than anything." He said, "Okay, don't be an idiot. Just come on, be Peter." And I did. And it was a much better shot. And then I got Mike Douglas and Dinah and Merv and everybody else. And that was, but again, that was Rickles being like my dad.
You love hearing these Rickles soft side stories. Really.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, that's who he was. And my last interaction, we lost a castmate, David Landsberg, really funny, wonderful actor. And so we went to his memorial in Los Angeles, and Barbara was there, Barbara Rickles, and the memorial's over and we're outside, and she gives me a big hug and whispers in my ear. She said, "Come here," takes my hand, and off to the side of the temple are these plots, and the last plot just has big Rickles, where it's his family plot. And so we walk over, and I have no idea what Barbara's doing, and she whispers to me, "Don wants to say hi."
Oh, wow.
Takes my hand, walks over and says, "Go ahead." And I just talked to him for 30 seconds. And it's just like, wow. That's the Rickles and the Rickles family that people don't know. And you don't get to be a star of that size if you don't have that kind of other side to you. He was such a great family man. He was a good husband, and he took care of us all. So
that's fantastic. That's a great story.
Thanks.
I do want to ask about a show that you on. You were on one of my favorite shows growing up. It was required viewing in my house, Battle of the Network Stars. So yep. and you did well in that. So how was it? Because we've had other people on that have done it, and they said that it was all fun and all joking around until the competition started. Then everyone started taking it really seriously. So how was it for you?
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. And I remember Dan Haggerty, right? Dan Haggerty played Usually Adams.
Usually Adams, yeah.
Showed up on whatever day we started, and he had just been in a motorcycle accident. And so his whole side was all scraped up. And I think it was Robert Conrad, who was our coach, the head of our team, said, "Haggerty, I can't do anything." He said, "I'm doing everything." He said, "First thing up is kayak. I'm in it." He said, "You're going to stick to it. It's like you're bleeding all the way down." But that's when the actor became the athlete. And I was not such a great runner. I wasn't great that, but I had pretty good hands. And so when the football, this and that, I remember my dad saying, who had watched it, said, Cosell said, "He's got hands like Trumpy," who was a tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals, because I caught 3 touchdown passes. And it was like, that's all I needed. And then, of course, that was it. That's until I worked with Dr. J, I was like, that's my athletic career.
Yeah, we would ask. I watched your Battle of the Network Stars last night, but now I have to ask: was Conrad as nuts as he appeared? Oh, he was. Okay.
He was wound a little tight, but again, like, here's a guy that just made everything work, and if it wasn't going to work, he was going to force it to work. And if he had this team, he was going to make us a team, and he was very intense. But then at the end, when we finished, we all went to his house in Malibu and all kind of chilled out and drank beer, and he became Bobby Conrad. Just that's who he was. And so, you walk into a restaurant 10 years later and you'd get a hug and you go, "Isacksen, Conrad, how are you?" It was just, we all grew up this way. We all grew up in the same thing. And I was on the lot a few years ago at Fox selling something, and I walk around the corner and Harmon comes out from NCIS. And it's just like the strides don't even break, that he just comes over and big hug. and he goes, "How are you?" And we just catch up like we saw each other a week ago. That's the fraternity I was in with these people growing up in television in the 80s. That's why I love this, that you guys are doing this, because I never really go back and think about it. I get, so much stuff on Facebook, and it's like I look at it, and my kids and my wife looks at it, and they're the biggest fans ever. So
like we started at the beginning, we're huge fans of yours. And you just mentioned, Dr. J. So let's move on to one of the biggest cult classic films that there is, the Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. Besides you, it had Dr. J, Jonathan Winters, Meadowlark Lemon, Stockard Channing, Flip Wilson, and many others, including some great basketball players. So how did you get involved in that?
There's a wonderful casting person named Fern Champion, still casting today, did Hatfields McCoy's, done this. She's my dear friend after all these years. She did Surf 2 and Fish and this. And she'd get mad at me because she goes, "You don't remember I did Fish?" I said, "Well, I think I do." And so my agent called me and said, "They'd like you to do Fish, and it's basketball, and it's a great character." And these producers had just done Car Wash. So really what we found out as this went through was they really wanted a soundtrack, which was Car Wash. That's what made that movie Car Wash. And my buddy Melanie Mayron. So my agent said, "So we're going to be okay on money, but they have one thing, and you got to try out." I said, "Audition?" They said, "No, not audition, just try out basketball wise." I said, "What?" They said, "Yeah, you got to go over to the gym in Burbank, and they're going to put together a little 3-on-3 and this and that." And I said, "That'll be fun. Yeah, okay, I'll do that." So I go over, and this enormous guy meets me at half court, and I look at him and I go, "You play for the Lakers?" And it was Happy Hairston. And he said, "Yeah, I'm running this for Jerry Tarkanian." I said, "Jerry Tarkanian?" Like he's the biggest. There's Jerry Tarkanian. And so we just start. I guess I must have done okay, because the next week I was in Pittsburgh, and Jay just kind of comes and goes, "So Tarkanian said you were an okay, and you played with Carter, and you did this." So he goes, "Let's go." And we just started to play full-length basketball games in the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh against like Detroit and this. And it was so surreal for me as an actor, wannabe, I was still doing the Hollywood All-Stars and that stuff, but it was an interesting movie. It was an interesting time.
So we read that you often challenged Dr. J to games. Is that true?
Well, what happened was at lunchtime, I would go up and I would say, "Hey, you want to play one-on-one?" And he goes, "Yeah." So he'd throw me the ball, and I'd go up and he'd smack it down, and then he'd get the ball and hit 13 in a row and say, "Want to do it tomorrow?" And I went, "Yeah." And I think we played 25, 30, 35 games. I never, ever scored a point.
Wow.
And he was and there was no like, "I'm going to take you." It wasn't any of that. It was just, he was Dr. J. It's like playing against Jordan. It's just, I'm not going to score, because every time I go up, he's going to just either take the ball from me as I'm going up to score, or he's going to block it, or he's going to give me a hip check, and he's going to like, all right. He was a professional basketball player, and he was the gentlest, sweetest man. And you talk about Ron Howard and this and that. No, maybe it wasn't Ron. Someone called me about 5-6 years ago from the NBA Finals, and they said, it's my buddy Leslie Greif, who's a big producer, and he said, "Hey, got somebody who wants to say hi." And it was Julius. And they were talking about the Fish. But that's the kind of man he is. And knew he wasn't a great actor. I mean, I think it's the only movie that he ever did, but no one gave it more effort and tried harder. and we played against, my comeuppance as a ball player was we're playing full court, and I got down early, and I see this mountain of a man come in, and I went, I got this, and I go up and just slam it on defense, and then we get the ball and we're going back the other way, and I'm going up for this just perfect uncontested layup, and I open my eyes, I'm on the floor, and I'm out cold, and I open, and it's Bob Lanier face to face, who says to me, "You're an actor. I'm in the NBA." And I went, okay, embarrassed him, won't do that again. And that's the lesson that we learned. Branscombe Richmond and all the guys that played on our team learned that we were actors. So take your place. And when Gilbert Moses and whoever says, this is your shot, take your shot. But don't, on the full court games, just play like actors. And we learned that. Well, so Meadowlark was spectacular. And Jonathan Winters, I wish I had it close. Jonathan Winters took me under his wing because he would either forget his medication or want to go out on a Sunday stroll, and somehow he wanted me to go. We lived in the same town, so he wanted me to go with him. And when we got back from Fish, I would get calls about once a week, and Jonathan would say, "Hey, would you come on over?" He said, "I'm writing a book, Winter's Tales," which is one of the classic Jonathan. It's a classic book. And he would read to me to see if it was okay. And then he was going to move to Santa Barbara, and I came over, and he said, "Here." And he gave me an original Jonathan Winters painting. And he was just, again, you get blessed by, I guess it's the energy that you put out is the energy you're going to get back. But he was this eccentric, wild, he was 16 miles ahead of anything you thought. And but yet needed to have a buddy, needed to walk the streets of Pittsburgh on off days with somebody he trusted, in case he kind of went a little nutty. Like he would go out and direct traffic in front of the Hotel Penn, and they would go, "Peter, could you get him off the road?" It's like, okay, good. But I guess that's the fabric that makes up this 45, 46-year career, is stories like that I don't often think about. But then when I think about the Fish, I think about sitting in a room next to Meadowlark Lemon and going, that's Meadowlark Lemon. It's just, it's Dr. J. It's pretty cool.
Well, you want to say something? Or
no, I was just going to move on to like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. What we read many stories that he was unhappy during the making of that film, and that was and then he left. So what happened? Anything you can share with us?
Kareem was unhappy. I think that was, I don't know him very well, but he didn't like, Kareem was, I don't know, was he bigger than Jay during that? Maybe. He was certainly at the height of his game, and I think going through a lot up here that he's talked about. And I think mental health now in the NBA is a big, big issue. So all I know is he came in one day and no one was ready. And we were a disorganized shoot because Gilbert Moses hadn't done a movie like that. And the guys had come off of, they wanted to get this movie out, and we had Lionel Richie and the Silvers and this. So it was like all planned, and we were way behind. So Kareem came in the arena one day and just kind of lost it and took a director's chair and just kind of in his way, just kind of threw it in the stands. And it just happened to be the director of photography who had done 10, and I think his name was Frank Stanley. And it was a gift for him that was all teak.
Oh.
And it was, and I would know at this day, because I know Kareem is a gentle, beautiful man, and that was a tough time, but we've all had tough times. We've all gone through where you just want to go, you know what, I just want to break a window or do something. And I think it was a tough movie. It was, we were trying to emulate it was a great script, but actors, Stockard Channing would come in and out. Jonathan would come in and out. Gilbert Moses was a little overwhelmed, I think. Debbie Allen, wonderful. I mean, we had more talent around this movie, and how it didn't all gel to be a Animal House or this, I don't know. I was just an actor, and I just kind of watched everything unfold. And Pittsburgh became a great city that I really loved, and I have friends there. But it was, for me, as an observer actor, I saw things that I knew as a producer I didn't want to do when I could finally produce. But yeah, Kareem, that was a tough moment to watch.
Let's talk about Under the Rainbow. I've heard much of the cast talk about how bad it was, and it's kind of based on all the stories about how the little people behaved during the making of Wizard of Oz, you know, the legends and innuendo or whatever. I'm going to go say that I love the movie. Okay, I have seen it many, many times.
Oh,
so
thanks.
Besides you, look at the cast. It was Chevy Chase, Carrie Fisher, Eve Arden, Billy Barty, Adam Arkin, and Pat McCormick, and also Jerry Marin, who was in the original. So how did you come to appear in that movie?
Auditioned for Steve Rash, and I had an offer to do a pilot at the same time, but I wanted to do this movie because of Carrie and Chevy and all of that. So my agent thought I was an idiot because I took less money to do Under the Rainbow. I did 6 weeks at like $2,500, but then Adam lost his dad today, and so sorry, Adam. It's a great family. So Adam and I had this trailer together, and we saw it was pretty slow going out, because there would be days where the AD would come in and go, yeah, Carrie's not here. She didn't get back from Chicago or New York. She's with Paul Simon. And so we're going to shoot Clouds today. So you guys just hang out. And, but they had built this enormous hotel, the Culver Hotel, inside. And we'll get to the little people in a second. But the overarching Peter Adams story was we'd sit in there, and about 4 or 5 weeks in, this AD, wonderful AD, came in and said, Peter, your agent's going to get a phone call, and they're going to offer you $50,000 to complete the movie. And I went, yes, thank you. That's what we're talking about. He said, no, you're going to say, no, I'm not going to take that. I said, what am I going to take? He said, what's your TV weekly? I said, oh, my TV weekly's like 6. He said, you want 6,000 a week till the end of the movie. And he pulled out this big board, and he said, we're like November. And he said, I see you in April. And I went, what? And it became a really nice job for me and Adam, I think, and all of that. But we would just kind of hang around, and you'd do a scene here and you'd do a scene there, but it was very like, Steve Rash is going to make the movie he's always wanted to make, but he had Chevy in a very tough time. He had lost his friend in Hawaii. Carrie writes about it in Postcards from the Edge. She was having a really tough time. And basically the story was based on Leo B. Mayer, when they said, well, I'm going to make the Wizard of Oz. And Carrie's character back in 1939 said, you know, the little people are only this tall. And he said, great, put them 3 in a room. So we put them 3 in a room in the Culver Hotel in 1939. Well, they'd never seen each other. They'd never seen another little person. So all they did was have sex and drink. Well, the same thing happened in 1981. They put them in the same hotel. And you'd sit on set, and there was a wonderful actor named Little Pat Bylan, who ended up being E.T.
Oh, yeah.
So he had a ladder that he would, like a 2-foot ladder, and he brought it over. He'd hook it to my director's chair. He would climb up the ladder, climb in my lap, and he would go, hey, Peter, what do you think of the tax structure today? And I would think to myself, I have a 65-year-old man who's 3'6" sitting in my lap talking about news. And I frankly loved it. I'm still friends. I went to the Billy Barty golf tournament as the only non-little person. And it's the fabric that makes up a much larger life.
That's incredible. I worked with Jerry Marin and his wife.
I love
Elizabeth Barrington. Yeah, he was my stand-in on Escape Twitch Mountain, the Disney film I did in the mid-'70s. And boy, what absolutely lovely people. They befriended my grandmother, who was my set sitter, and they were just, I loved them to death. But
Jerry
anyway,
Marin
that's my own little aside for a moment. But we've heard so many stories about Chevy Chase's behavior through the years. Now, you mentioned that he was going through a tough time in that film. How was he during filming?
Tough. I mean, he was there and not there. It was that. I don't know all the details, because you're in a trailer and they say, come on out, you got a scene with Chevy. I don't think I had as much to do with Chevy as I did with Carrie. But he was certainly around, and he met his wife, who he's still with, who was a PA on Rainbow. And I think she was a real steadying force for him to get through that movie. But he was the reason we were making the movie. So, as an actor, we're all fellow actors, right? So we're going to protect our fellow actors. And we had a scene, the first scene in the movie, which I think Carrie talks about in Postcards, that it's Leo B. Mayer, my character, and Carrie's character, and he's going to show the back lot of MGM and through westerns being shot, and we walk through it, and there's it's the setup to the movie, for crying out loud. And we end at one of these streets and there's Oz, and he said, this is the movie you're doing, and Oz is all lit up. Well, she showed up that day, and for whatever reason just was not herself, couldn't speak, couldn't do that. So they put a weight belt around her under her beautiful dress, and we picked her up 4 inches off the ground, Jack Crucian and I, and walked. And she did her stuff, and Jack and I would do our lines. Then we looped it all later. And I don't know that it's in the movie, because I don't think it worked, but she writes about it in Postcards from the Edge, that was how she started Under the Rainbow. And she was Carrie Fisher. I mean, she was one of our stars, and Eve Arden, and just this character guy that kind of always felt lucky to be there.
Well, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Jonathan. No, Jonathan.
I was just going to say, I think I've seen that movie at least 10 times already. I do enjoy it. So go ahead, Ike. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, you've got all these A-list actors and so much talent on it. While you were making it, what were some of your thoughts about it? I mean,
I'll tell you, I kept going back to the script I had originally read that I thought was one of the best, and the same with Fish, by the way, 2 of the best scripts I had ever read. And through the process of falling behind, I know that after on Under the Rainbow, those guys had done Buddy Holly. So they were all hot. Steve Rash had, I think, won an Oscar for Buddy Holly or nominated. So when they took it to whatever studio they were with, I think it was Columbia, Columbia said, too much money for, we don't think Chevy and Carrie are going to carry that budget. So they went over to TriStar, someone, I don't know. I kind of all, it's all hazy. And they just said, go make the movie. You have a budget, but don't worry about it. We got Chevy and Carrie. And from that point on, a movie can kind of wander. And that's what Under the Rainbow did. They built this enormous set that was, I would imagine, the budget that Columbia didn't want to do. But it was 2 sound stages together that did the Hotel Culver. It was enormous, and you just find yourself, because of Chevy's schedule, because of Carrie's schedule, and back and forth to New York and breaking up with Paul Simon, which I think was that time. Again, I wasn't in the meetings. I was just an actor, and Adam and I would sit in our truck and go, another day of watching the clouds. And or they'd say, you guys can go home and we'll call you in a week. And I remember there was one day I was like, I think I'm done with this movie. And then you'd get a check for 4 weeks and you'd go, I guess I'm still on the movie. And they would always invite the actors to Friday. They would have these wonderful Friday, like surf and turf, like catered lunches. And it's like, this is the way movies are made. This is great. So I drive down to Culver City to have lunch on Friday, and it's like, hey, everybody, hi. And but Chevy's always been good to me. He's always been a friend, and he's still with his wife. So I don't know. I was just, again, happy, truly happy to be a part of it.
You ever revisit the movie and go check it out again?
No, I've never seen it.
Really?
I've never seen it. I've never seen a lot of stuff I've done. Wow. I'm not a big, my wife, Deborah, watches everything. She's like, watches historical stuff, this, that, that. And I watch sports.
I do want to ask about another cult classic that you were in was Surf 2. So I read a lot of behind the scenes stuff about this. It had Eddie Deason, Eric Stoltz, Lyle Wagner, Ruth Buzzy. So what are your memories of making that film, besides it being called Surf 2 when there was not a first one? So
yeah, it was a sequel of nothing. Again, Fern Champion cast it. And so I kind of remember reading this character, which seemed pretty like what I do. And Randall Badot, the director, is like, cool, we're going to shoot in Malibu and this and that. And I got a call about a day before we started from Cleavon Little, who I didn't know, who got my number from not Slappy White, not this, another wonderful Black actor. Anyway, Cleavon said, you're in Studio City, right? I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm in Nichols Canyon. So when you go up and over the canyon to go to Malibu, can you pick me up? And I went to myself, it's Cleavon Little. Like, what do you say? Of course, I'm going to pick you up. So I think 6 weeks we shot the movie, and I picked him up almost every day. And we had these wonderful conversations about life and this, and he was a deep, great guy. So that was a huge bonus for me because I was a big fan of Cleavon. And Eddie Deason became my friend. We had worked together. And Pat McCormick had been a friend because he wrote The Tonight Show, and I spent so much time backstage at the Tonight Show because we shot next door, and he fell in love for the first time with the tall blonde also from the Tonight Show, the tea lady girl, whatever her name was, I can't remember. And Lyle Wagner, who I played a lot of tennis tournaments with, and he's just good. And we had this little compound in Malibu, and no one really knew we were there, what we were doing. And we kind of make it up as we went along. And Randall Badot's father-in-law, who was wealthy, kind of was financing it. And it just was like, I don't know, Peter and Timmy make a movie. It just happened. And the checks cashed, and we did it. And we never heard about it. And they called during the pandemic, and we were living in Cabo San Lucas, and a producer called and said, we bought the rights to the movie. Would you do a behind the scenes thing? And we went, sure, I'll do that. So my wife shot it, and we did it.
Oh,
We've seen it.
Oh man, that's awesome. But the movie definitely got more popular years after it was initially released. Do you think it was fairly criticized at the time?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we were a bunch of knuckleheads and Randall Badot had no idea what he was doing. I think he would admit that now. He had never directed a movie. He said he wrote it in 48 hours because he was high. And it's like, okay, well, that makes perfect sense, I guess. And then he got it, and his stepdad financed it, and they went, let's go make a movie.
Oh, man.
It's what we did. And all of a sudden it's you show up, and there's like, wow, there's cameras and trucks, and they're going to feed us. It's like, feels like a movie. Let's go say our lines. Well, and Eric Schatz is in it. Eric Stoltz.
Yes.
Yeah. So he became a good buddy. Stoltz was like, he and another young guy, they were like the hotties. So,
well, before we started recording, we touched briefly upon the softball team that you were with, that you were involved with. So this seems like you had a celebrity team, but you had Mark Harmon playing for you, who was a phenomenal athlete. So how did that come about, and who did you play?
You had to try out. It was a guy named Russ Gill, and he put this team together because there was a softball league in the Valley that was all like ICM had a team, William Morris had a team, the Jacksons had a team. So there were like 8 teams, and we'd get over there, and we were good. I mean, we took it seriously. So seriously, we went to Hawaii for 2 weeks, and the whole media group of Hawaii, this Toyota dealerships, and there took such great care of us. We stayed at the Royal Hawaiian and this. So we go to Aloha Stadium, and Tony Lobianco is our pitcher. And about the 4th inning, Mark Harmon comes over, like there's a ground ball to shortstop. He fires it to first. He said, come here, Isacksen. And I said, okay. He said, we got to talk to Tony. So we go up to the mound, and we said to Tony, we said, you got to let these guys hit the ball. They are media. They are like disc jockeys in this. And Tony looked at us with only his face, and he goes, I'm pitching a no-hitter. And we're like, okay, let's just they flew us here for 2 weeks, have treated us to the greatest dinners in Hawaii. We've taken guests here, but and so what we were talking about before was we played in major league parks, and we played at Candlestick Park, which just doesn't get any more iconic. And so we're out there warming up and throwing the ball around, and Michael Keaton comes out of the locker room, and he's got a big San Francisco Giant, like official jacket on. It's all zipped up, but his pockets is like they're like balloons. And I go, Keats, I said, what's in your pocket? He pulls it out and he goes, free gum. There's nothing but free gum in there. We're like, whoa. And he goes, in the other pocket, he goes, sunflower seeds, as many as you can eat. That's an actor. That's That's who we were. And so we played, I think it was about 8 years. We played
Wow.
a ton of games. And Harmon was beyond Harmon. We were in San Francisco at another time. And you know, when you're in the luggage thing and you got the conveyor belt that brings the luggage down and all that, well, it got stuck. So who runs up in pink shorts and a blue shirt to unstick the luggage? Mark Harmon, like superhero. It's like everyone's going, that's Mark Harmon. And we're on another flight, not as superhero-ish. We're going LA, Chicago, Chicago, Louisville, with Tony Danza and Carlos Palomino, who was at that point, the middleweight champion of the world, boxer. And we land in Chicago, and the flight attendant comes to me in like 1A or whatever, and she said, Peter, I'd just like to tell you, there'll be no alcohol into Louisville because you've drank the entire plane out of alcohol. I said, okay. And I hear Danza and Palomino behind me going, no way. We'll be right back. They leave the plane where they're dropping people off in Chicago. They like running down, you could see them down the glassway. And the pilot's like, I've had enough of this. Close the doors. We're going to Louisville. And we backing out to get to the runway. And you see Danza and Carlos with bags running back like this. We left them.
Oh my God.
But that was, they didn't make the plane to Louisville. I think they drove. But it was just, it was again like a fraternity. It was like my college. It was like my college team. And we really I had to try out. I had to go. It's where I met my friend Jamie Widows from Animal House and now director at Mom and 2.5 Men and all this stuff. That we're out in the outfield, and just like the Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, this Russ Gill said, all right, I'm going to hit you some line drives and this and that. Then you're going to play first and you're going to do this. And we had to try out. We had to be good.
Wow.
And then the last little tiny thing was we played the Jacksons. And the Jacksons were good. I mean, it was Tito and Jermaine and this and that, and they were good athletes. And Michael would sit in the stands. And kind of they'd keep people away, but he was Michael Jackson of that era. And so I would say hi because I'd walk by and this and that every week. And we'd have a little chat once in a while. And I'm at the Greek Theater, I think, seeing Elton John. And I have to go to the bathroom. So I go to the bathroom and it's sealed off with security. And I said, well, I kind of got to go. And they sort of recognize me in this. And I said, like, who's in there, Elton John? And they said, no, actually, it's Michael Jackson. I said, well, I know Michael. Hang on. I said, Michael, hi, Peter. I said, can I just come in and, yeah, it's okay. Peter's okay. And I went in and we peed together. And that's the closest I've ever been to Michael Jackson. And it was like, okay, I guess once you're in the group, you're in the group.
Oh, good grief, man. Well, what made you decide to transition out of acting and start focusing on production?
I just think it was destiny. I think it was like, how am I going to still do these goofy roles when I'm, 50, 60 years old? And I thought I could give more. And I was lucky enough to meet a woman and fall in love and get married to a woman that had my back and would give me the confidence to go out and sell stuff and do this. And she's how television gets made. She makes it. And I had this wonderful safety net in between my on-camera career and the first thing I sold, which was advertising and voiceovers. And I did almost 4,000 voiceovers. I was Keebler Elf. I just did voiceovers a lot and helped run a company that was the biggest radio production company in the world. And that was my soft entry, that I didn't have to sell something, so I could go in as Peter and, oh, we remember you in TV and this and that, but I didn't have to sell it. So I just came up with stuff and would walk in. There was this crazy, wonderful executive named Mike Darnell at Fox who bought all kinds of crazy stuff. And he started to buy shows from me. And Ron Howard stepped up, and Dennis Rodman stepped up, and this. And I just, again, I think the universe looks and says, he's a pretty good guy. He's got a pretty good reputation. He's been good for our business. So, and he's trying to do it the right way. So reward him. And then I think the biggest moment and it will all come back to Netflix Monday night, is there's a fella named David Hill who ran Fox Sports and brought the football to Fox Sports and Major League Baseball. And he's a giant. He's running F1. He started Live. He's David Hill. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger. So he ran the network in between network presidents at Fox, and he said, I want to meet Isacksen. So I walked in, he said, Mr. Isacksen, you do some crazy shit. What do you want to do? And I said, I want to do the Super Bowl of archaeology. I have no idea where it came from. It just spouted out of my head. I've never been to Egypt, having no idea what archaeology really is. And he said, go. And he grabbed me on the way out of his office, and he said, use my sports guys. And we did. It took us 10 months, but we did the first live 2-hour special from the Giza Plateau. And so let's
talk about that. It's out now. You know, we're recording this ahead of time, but when we post it, it'll be out a day or two right now. It's called The Unknown, The Lost Pyramid. It's on Netflix, like you said. I haven't gotten to see it yet, but I did see your excellent special, Tut, Century of Secrets. So how long have you been interested in all this? I mean, I thought that the Tut special is fantastic. So how long have you been interested in this type of thing?
My wife produced the Tut special, so it's really good. It is. Yeah, we were over there together and did them at the same time. But it's, I think what I bring to Egypt is that I brought Zahi Hawass to television 23 years ago on the first one, and I think he trusts me. And then I brought my friend and Leslie Greif and my wife in, and on the second one. And so there's, in a country like that, everyone's coming over with money, and we want this find, and we want this find, and this find. But I think Dr. Waziri and Dr. Hawass trust me, and they trust that we will do the right thing. And on the Netflix one, we've been editing for almost a year, and Max Solomon has done an unbelievable job with his vision. And you look at some of the stills and the promo and this, and it's a piece of art that has a wonderful story to it. So I think it's the best thing I've ever done over there. But the live stuff was really, like, live from Egypt is pretty cool.
Yes, it is. Well, I mean, I've always had a fascination with ancient Egypt as well, but what is it about that era that appeals to you the most?
I don't mean to sound like an idiot, but I guess I will. It's really not. I mean, I hadn't been down on every show. Everybody goes down into the tombs. They scare the crap out of me. They give me kind of the heebie-jeebies, because it's like, you don't know what you're going to get bit from, or this, or is there a curse or this. And they, of course, make it worse for me because I've never been down in one. 2 years ago, when we were scouting both for Tut and for Netflix, I had no choice and went down. And it was life-changing, because I got to see the stuff that we get, producers that get involved that are so smart and are so invested in every bit of this, like Priya, like Max, like Greif, like my wife who did Tut and did others, it's like they're really, really historians. And that's what Hawass will, you go to his office and it's just book lined. And I just am so in awe of anyone that has that kind of commitment to that kind of history. And I think my part of it is I really promote Egypt because I love the people. They've been really good to me. And for a kid that never, until I did Sharkey and went to, New York to promote, my trips as a kid up till that point were in a car. We would go to Lake Arrowhead or Big Bear or Palm Springs. So that I've seen the whole world, it's like surreal. That I land and I get to, like, I don't know, it's pretty crazy.
God. Well, what's the process like for putting something like this together? Is it difficult to get permission to film in Egypt, or what sort of obstacles do you have to deal with there?
Yeah, it's a process, but because Mustafa Waziri, who runs the Council of Antiquities, is a friend, a true friend. So it'd be like asking a neighbor, can I come over and your tree's beautiful, can I sit under it? They're very protective about the fines. They got hit hard by COVID. The Grand Museum should be open by now. They built a beautiful visitor center that should be open. It's not, they're a little behind. So they continue to make product, but they want to make it their way. And I don't want to say it's a tough country to produce in, because when I did my first one, a gal that worked for me came up and said, taught me a lesson that I've used for 23 years. She came up and her name was Ann, and she said, Peter, would you talk to my dad? And I said, sure. And I picked up the phone. He said, hi, it's Colin Powell. And I went, what? Right, Ann Powell. Oh, I get it. So, hi, General. He said, hi, have you ever been to Egypt? I said, no, I go next week. He said, first thing you're going to do, you go to the embassy. You see who's running the embassy. Tell them I'm going to make all the appointments for you. He said, by the way, there's a thing called Hamburger Wednesday, best hamburger you'll ever have. I said, oh, okay. And he said, number 2, you're shooting 2 a.m. live. You're lighting up the pyramids. I said, I know, first time we're going to light up the pyramids. We nominated for an Emmy for it later. And he said, you're on direct flight path from the Cairo International Airport. Just remember it. And I went, right, okay. And he said, so take those 2 things, learn them, don't forget them. She's my daughter. Got it. So I get to Egypt, the embassy gates open, and I've been there 17 times. Every single time I go, the gates open and I say, hi, we're shooting this. And they put a tracker on me and my key staff, and they know where we are at all times. It's the greatest embassy ever. And Jonathan Cohen still might be there as our ambassador. So you take the precautions because you're 8,000 miles away and you're in a country that has had some problems, but you play it safe and you make sure everybody's safe. So.
Well, without giving too much away so people can watch it for themselves, what are some of the more fascinating or surprising things that you learned while filming this? Because when I was watching Tut, I would always learn that he was murdered, and it showed and the whole process of taking apart the mummy, I guess. So what was some of the surprising things that you learned on this one?
Well, there's 2 finds on this one. There's one from Waziri and one from Hawass that one of them predates religion. Wow. And when you see this is a show about the story and the storytelling of archaeology and how much work goes into the dig that you don't really know. I posted something the other day on Instagram that is from above of the dig site, and it looks like a necropolis. Like they all look like that. Until you go down with these incredibly patient, wonderful archaeologists, and they go bit by bit by bit, and all of a sudden, like Howard Carter with Tut, where he opened a little thing and they said, "What do you see?" And he said, "I see something wonderful." And they're all driven by that. Hawass is a relentless archaeologist. Waziri is so passionate about every little, it's like you can't walk in these tombs because, especially me, I'm going to step on something. And it's like, so just soak in the 35, what happened down here 3,000 years ago? What happened down here? This was all built for a reason. And Egypt is a pretty spectacular place in that. And I think we're going to showcase it Monday on Netflix as well as anyone ever has.
I am absolutely dying to see this. Well, where do you go next? What's your next project?
Yeah, well, last year my wife and I have a very good friend, Stuart McLean, who I've worked a lot of brand content stuff with. And he called Deborah and I and said, "Would you help me out? I'm launching the first all-woman sports network." And we went, my wife was like, "We're in." And so we launched it with him. My wife did almost 100 hours of programming. So they've had kind of a break for the last few months while we've been busy, and came back to us because they've got Anheuser-Busch that's going to support them for a year as the founding women's sports network brand. So they've called us and said, "Get ready." And so at 12 o'clock, we get them back on the phone and off we go.
So that's great.
God.
Well, before we let you go, looking back at your films, are there any which are you most fond of or that stand out to you the most?
I guess, gosh, I would have to say my early stuff with Ron, just because it was so pure and the movies have held up, and Grand Theft Auto is now a big game, and he has been such a mentor to me and all of that. But they all have their own individual, they're all like my kids, they all have a story. And, I wouldn't have known Jonathan Winters without Fish. I wouldn't have known Adam without this, and Eddie Deason and all of that. They're all my kids, and I'm so proud to have them all.
How can fans find you and follow you?
Oh, I'm on Facebook, just Peter Isacksen, Instagram, Facebook. It's pretty simple. Just spell it right.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, again, we want to thank you so much for coming on today. As I said before, we're huge fans, and we were really looking forward to this. And it was very gracious of you to take time out to speak with us. And you're welcome back anytime.
Thanks. I loved it.
Thank you. Well, again, I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann. This has been Pop Culture Retro, and make sure you go watch Unknown, The Lost Pyramid on Netflix, and please subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.